Hey guys, so this is the second Q&A, and I just want to remind everyone again to download the school app to your phone because if you just use your computer, then it's kind of annoying to have to log in. It's not very easy, and so if you have it on your phone, it's just always open. So I just want to recommend that again. And was one more thing. Oh, and then to all the new members, welcome. And so I'm just gonna go right into it. So the first question that was still here. So this was Beata's question. So positive feelings. Okay, so it says, I have another question. As it feels like I am in a weird space on the journey. Quick story, I went through intense ego death December 24 to May 25. After that, for about a month, I felt like nothing had a meaning. Everything just was. And from June until now, my purging has significantly decreased, and I started attracting opportunities of different kinds. I wasn't looking for anything, but these opportunities find me. Sounds like manifestation. Anyway, as these opportunities show up in my life, I am experiencing joy and happiness like I've never experienced before. Always struggled with low self-esteem and feeling of not being worthy of anything. Actually, I have not only suppressed my negative emotions, but it turns out the positive ones as well. I am allowing myself to feel happiness, which, by the way, feels so intense. It feels like I am on steroids, like I am on top of the world. Maybe that's silly, but I have actually never experienced happiness before. There's also pride showing and feeling of being special, but my mind tells me that this is not a part of the spiritual journey, that I should be expressing anger and sadness. Oh, that's interesting. It tells me that I am back to square one. I would love to know whether that's part of the journey as well, and also how to feel joy and happiness. I usually just feel into the feeling, and it is so intense, it feels like I will explode. Sometimes I can't even sleep at night. I also allow myself to scream. I've seen a lot of things about how to connect with sadness, anger, fear, but nothing about positive emotions as far as I know. Thank you. Well, I just want to reread it because there's a number of things that I can talk about. But yeah, just in general, that's actually really interesting because maybe we always talk about the negative stuff. And obviously there's a reason for that. Most of our issues are with the negative stuff. We don't want to feel them because it's so uncomfortable. But yeah, there are a lot of moments on the journey when there is this like insane happiness. You could call it ecstasy. You know, it really does. Some people think that it's like godly, that it's divine. Um, and I guess the thing that I would say is obviously to feel it, but you can play just like we talk about, feeling all the negative emotions, giving them attention. You can do the exact same thing with this. So whatever is exciting you, whether it's like music that you're dancing to, or even things that we would call egoic. So if you're fantasizing about living a dream life or being able to whatever is giving you the excitement, even if that excitement could be a little bit of like deep down it's suffering. So like let's say if you don't have what you want and then you're dreaming about and like kind of jumping like a child, imagining it's about to come. I'm gonna have a better job or whatever it is. That excitement, give it all of your attention. And I want to keep saying in these Q&As that the actor analogy, becoming the actor, is like the best analogy for all of these experiences. So your mind could say, but am I going to jump up and down? That's ridiculous. But it's like, who cares? First of all, nobody can see you. You're going to be doing this at home probably. And you know, all of these things that we talk about are literally just this is already here. And so why not fully embrace it if it's already here and see how far I can take it. So I said with music, um, daydreaming, whatever makes that feeling become more intense and therefore you're going to keep giving your attention, whatever you can do, do that so that you can feel all of that fully. And I just want to say the quote that I think is by Buddha, which doesn't sound fun to the ego, but that's okay. All feelings are pain. I think that's it. Or all feelings are suffering, something like that. Which means that deep down, this huge excitement that I've felt also many times, it's kind of like you can only feel excited if you're not peaceful. So if peace is kind of like a flat line, right? So it's like you could say if you feel peace all the time, that you're feeling good all the time. So why would you need a boost? So it's almost like if there's something that you're not liking, you're actually kind of not feeling well, and then you need the boost. So I just wanted to throw that in, that all feelings are pain.
Yeah, I was just gonna add a story that or an example that came to mind of my own. It was probably a couple of years ago, if not a bit more. But I was completely broke, and I found maybe like £2 worth of coins that I didn't realize that I had. And I did that exact thing. And it made me genuinely happy because I didn't have anything coming in for a while, I guess. And I behaved as if I had won the lottery, like really like, like going into it. It sounds ridiculous because it's nothing. But I felt genuine happiness because of it, and I was like literally jumping up and down, like holding these coins, and completely embodying it. Um, Very much like the like you said about the character, we talk a lot about rage and getting to sort of the depth of what's available to you there, like saying things, punching pillows and whatever, and doing those things, not those things because it would be different for joy. Because joy is repressed very much as well. People who are numb completely repress that as well. And as you said, Steve, that the lows have their counterpart with the highs. They're a duality that exists and are interdependent on one another. So it can be expected that as many lows as you hit, there'll be the opposite side as well.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say one more thing. One way that joy has naturally arisen in me is it's kind of like, let's say I'm in the morning, and then I remember that at night I'm gonna watch this series that I'm really enjoying, and then there's this burst of excitement or joy. Um, so that's just one example. So if somebody can't really, visualize it. Um, yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know if anything to add. But just, oh, you said the joy is repressed a lot, and it definitely is. And I just wanted to stress that if you feel silly, and if you feel like, I don't know how old, 30, I'm 50, whatever your age is, and you feel silly to get so excited like a little kid, that's exactly then what you should be doing. So you face a little fear of
Yeah.
looking foolish, and also seeing how far can I take the joy. So if I jump or whatever you're doing, maybe you'll feel even more of it, and then there's a new experience. You felt into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I feel like embarrassment can be accompanied with like the expression of joy.
Mm.
Like you don't want to be seen being too happy or it's a very vulnerable thing to like be like really openly happy, and of course you don't have to do this in front of everyone, but you could push yourself not to an uncomfortable degree, but see how you respond to be like really jubilant, like over the moon, and see how much resistance there is to looking stupid or feeling silly or embarrassed or not allowed to, it's still one of the things that like parents will do to their children, as much as like, don't be angry or like don't express your anger. It's like don't show off, don't overreact, these kind of things. So yeah, well worth exploring just as much as anything else.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are parents, unfortunately, that say, like, there's nothing to be laughing about in this moment, right? Or something like that.
Yeah,
Why are
yeah,
you smiling so much? What's wrong with you? And then you learn to suppress it.
yeah. Because other people's joy can be triggering for, other
Yeah.
people. Did you want to touch on the manifestation part as well?
Okay, sure. I guess you have
Um,
something, right? And then maybe I'll think of something too.
um, yeah, I mean, it just makes me think of being in a state of resistance to what is often, I think, leads to decision making and actions that are counterproductive to a nice life.
Yeah.
You know, so when things are allowed to be, even if they're like externally horrible, by all accounts, when there becomes less when there is less resistance, then things seem to just loosen up. I wouldn't necessarily call it anything other than what it is, but um again, I'm just thinking of my own life when I've sort of been in a state of extreme resistance to what is and blamed external factors for, it's all like my job or like these people or who I'm spending time around or even me and my thoughts, whatever, are making this unbearable. But then once the allowing comes, life just seems to kind of like get a little bit more in the flow of things. And I don't mean in any sort of magical sense. I just mean that there's more clear thinking. You can see more of what's actually happening rather than with this filter overview of resistance.
Yeah. And since you mentioned manifestation, I guess I can talk a little bit about that.
Mm.
I think the confusion with manifestation is first, there are so many people out there where manifestation seems to be absolutely like a scientific fact where they will visualize and then magically it appears. This sort of thing happens to people, right? It actually does. I've seen it with other people. But the I think the illusion is that, let's say that it's me and I've manifested whatever I want. The idea that always comes from the ego is that I'm the one responsible. Like I've got this power here. And when I use this power, I'm like, I want this, and there's my power, and I got it. And I think it's to kind of zoom out. It's almost like there's existence, there's this universe, whatever you want to call it. And then for you to think that you're somehow changing existence to like match what you want. Sometimes it seems that way, but I think what's happening is what was always going to happen. So it's almost like a synchronicity, which just means, you had this visualization or whatever, and you were already, that was always going to happen. And then it's also part of that person's journey to really experience that and believe that it's their power. It's a power that I have to get what I want. And so, what was the other thing I was going to say? Well, to bring it back to what you said, which is that when we think about manifestation a lot, it's because we're resisting where we are. But what I also want to say about that is that it's not your fault that you're resisting where you are. And what I've done many times, and I still do sometimes, is I've talked about playing the lottery, right? And thinking that I'm going to win money. And this is an interesting topic because it's very, very confusing. Some people would say if you keep playing, you're blocking it because you're not allowing it. You're very desperate, and that energy doesn't match, right? Having all this money. And that even may be true, right? Somebody that has a lot of money is not desperate because they already have it, and therefore that's how they would feel. But in the name of exploring all of your parts, what I do when that comes, and I notice it's getting smaller and smaller, but I say to myself, if it's still here, it's like a little kid, and I don't have a limit. I don't have like you can come up to me 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, but then if you come the next time, I'm going to ignore you. Every time. So sometimes it comes up and then it feels, I always say, like it's tugging at me, like you should buy one, you should buy a lottery ticket. And my mind says, like, do I still need to? Is this like, but if it's happening, I go and I buy it. And then when I don't win, guess what happens? Emotional release. Something moves, something happens. And so this whole manifestation thing creates so much fear that what if I hadn't done that? What if I'm like, oh, I'm not going to buy it so that I can show the universe that I'm like more allowing, that I'm not worried about it. But that's silly. What I'm interested in is becoming truly free, free of all of this suffering. And so I went and I bought the ticket. Maybe my mind plays, oh, it's going to be this time, it's going to be this time. And maybe there's some joy and stuff like that. It doesn't happen anymore, but it did in the process. And then when I don't win, there's the pain that I didn't want to face. And so you can play with all of these things and not be afraid that you're making a horrible mistake. Oh, should I do this? Should I do that? That's one of the things that I think the process frees you so much from, which is you feel kind of afraid, like, oh my God, if I do this, it's going to be a horrible mistake. If I do, there are no horrible mistakes, right? In terms of your emotions and things.
Yeah. And the again, it's also a question that you can ask of what is the ego, how is the ego benefiting from manifestation? You know, it's or why does it need to be there? Because of course to manifest is to deny right here, right now, the discomfort. You're saying I'm uncomfortable with how things are now, how I feel, so I want to manifest and be somewhere else, feel different, be different, have something else. And it's a blatant rejection of confronting the reality of the discomfort that's there to be looked at. Um, I was going to say one more thing about, um, I think it's gone.
It's funny because this is such a big topic. I
Yeah,
have like something else as well, and then because it could almost be a whole video just about manifestation. But
yeah.
what I wanted to say is I made a video. I think I even deleted it, I'm not sure. So whether you have an experience like someone that says, I manifest everything that I want all the time, like it's just unbelievable. Oh, you want to do yours?
Well, I can hold on to it. I think I just remembered what it
Okay.
was.
Um, so yeah, it's gonna come back. Wait. Yeah, so I was saying, so imagine someone who is really having that experience, like everything is just coming to them, right? And then you have someone that nothing comes, sort of like me. And what's going to happen is when someone kind of gets everything that they want, right? They want a lot of money and you can buy so much stuff, you can travel. Um, what's going to happen is the same thing that's going to happen to the person that doesn't get what they want, which is if you are if it's already happening to you that you're kind of looking within, and then let's say you manifest all this stuff, you're going to notice, and at first you're not going to want to see it, that all of the stuff that you get doesn't really change the one thing that you want changed, which is you want peace. Peace is to feel safe within your body, it's to feel calm, it's to be able to enjoy the most ordinary things in life, right? And so there's this teacher that said, the ego goes into crisis whether it gets everything that it wants or it gets nothing that it wants. The same thing happens in crisis. Because if you get nothing that you want, you're being forced to be right here, right now. So if you don't have money, you don't have a partner, and nothing shows up, well, you're just forced back into the same thing. Loneliness, no money, all of these feelings. Well, what happens to the person that gets everything? At first, it seems like there's no more pain, right? You're just so excited and you're just playing with all the stuff that you have. But then once you start noticing that you're in the mansion that you wanted to have and you have everything that you could have ever imagined, and you wake up feeling a little bit like depressed, or you're like, this is boring. Yeah, people actually feel this way. That's why people are like, I'll never be bored when I have all the you will feel so bored once you get used to it. And so both scenarios lead to the same thing. So this is why don't believe people that are like, oh, I'm manifesting everything, so I've become a master. And then
Mm.
these people aren't, they know nothing. They don't have the power yet. They don't get it. That's not how existence works, right? Everything is happening. It's sort of like, I mean, the word God, it's like everything that God wants is happening, and there's no little you with a power to change existence. It's just all happening, right?
Yeah. So yeah, what I was going to say just kind of mirrors what you were going to say, what you said, which is this path of being honest about your emotions and processing them doesn't lead to objectively better external circumstances. It doesn't lead to the things that you want necessarily, but what it does lead to is an external reflection of honesty. So you know you will the more that you are honest with your emotions and process them, you will start to have an environment and life that is a representation of that honesty. You won't be lying to yourself. And I don't mean that in like a you're lying to yourself where you can't help it until you see what's there. But say for example, you have a relationship with someone that you know is very wrong for you on a deep level, but you haven't been honest about it yet, and you're with this person still, and then when you face that very, very difficult reality and process those emotions, you won't be able to be with that person anymore. It won't be possible. So this is what will happen. Now your external circumstance reflect that honesty. That person's no longer there. Maybe you're in a job that you haven't been able to be honest, that you absolutely hate to the pit of your stomach. And then you're able to do that, and that will result in you leaving that job because you simply won't be able to do it anymore. So these are the kind of external shifts that will happen. It doesn't mean that, oh, I've always wanted to live on a yacht and I've done my work and now would you look at that? I live in Hawaii all of a sudden. It's not that. But I guess a good illustration of this is that what uh will lead to happen is a more peaceful state no matter the circumstance. So you could find yourself in circumstances that you might not prefer, but your existence within them is not so conflicted and painful anymore. Um, yeah, I mean that is completely at odds with the general manifestation discourse of like I'm in a situation that I don't want, so I'm going to visualize and work myself up into a state that aligns with the things that I do want, which is completely ignoring all of this pain. Imagine you do this, you get to like a high vibration that's on the wavelength of something that you want, and then you attract these things, and so now you have them. But what happened to the emotions that were causing the discomfort? Where have they gone? They're still just in you and they're just waiting to explode at some point.
Yeah, and the last thing that you said is so true because if, every person has like a life path and different things happen to them. So I'm sure that some people are meant to experience things in a certain way. So someone that doesn't deal with any of the emotions and somehow they manifest everything. Th what didn't change is that feeling of I don't want to be where I am.
Yeah.
And this is people like most people in the world will just deny that this is true, but it's like if you have a feeling that I hate where I am, and then it doesn't go away, and you have everything that you could possibly want, that feeling will, it's like a pulse. You have everything around you that you want, and this pulse is, I don't want to be where I am. But I've got a mansion, I've got cars, I've got everything. I don't want to be where I am, which is I can't enjoy the now, I can't enjoy my life, right? Um, and I guess the final thing, so we can move on, is I don't want this to sound like the typical spiritual thing that says money is not spiritual. That's not what we're talking about. In
No.
fact, if you cry and you release all of the pain, you actually, if that were to happen to you, you just have money or whatever, actually that's when you'll be able to enjoy it. If you go to beautiful places, you won't be worried or you won't be on your phone instead of looking at the sunset and worrying about things, you'll be able to actually enjoy it. So, an enlightened person could actually be rich and enjoy it, but it's like at the same time that they can enjoy it, it's meaningless in the sense that they're not using that to escape anything. They're just, oh, here it is. If I lost it and I'm just in living a very simple life, there would be no suffering. So that's the difference. If it's there, great, I can enjoy it. I don't feel superior to anybody. I don't, nothing. And if I lost it, I'd be perfectly happy if it was an enlightened person. Okay. So, okay, the next one. Elena. Okay, so hypochondria. How to deal with hypochondria. The fear of illness is huge, and I am scared to sorry, and I am scared to stay with that fear because I believe that it will happen in real life. Because everybody's saying that your thoughts and feelings manifest in real life. How to look at that fear, how to stay with it, and be safe at the same time. Thank you. Um, so the first thing that I want to say is, um, where does it say people? Sorry, if everybody is saying that your thoughts and feelings manifest in real life. So this is probably, so imagine the idea that what you think and what you feel will bring you something in physical reality. So a disease. Um, that is kind of the ultimate prison in the mind because then you're afraid to do anything. I ca- oh, I have this natural thing arising. It could be anger, it could be whatever. And this thing is going to manifest like cancer or something. So you can see how that makes your reality so difficult because it's almost like you can't move. You can't do anything. And I think I even said this to her in one of our direct messages. I said, if this were true, I would be dead already. Because the amount of negative things that I have given my attention to, that you can't even believe how deep I've taken them, hasn't resulted in anything, right? Like not even an injury or anything. So you can see that that is the mind. There's reality. So you could say, as real as can be, it's physical reality. And the mind is saying that your imagination is going to result in a physical thing. Um, I just want to say that that doesn't exist. You know, it's scary. And then it's like, well, what if it does? What if it does? What if I'm going to be, well, this is sort of the nature of fear, right? That it's like all you can do is feel it. And the second thing I was going to say is, that okay, so you have a fear of illness, right? So this would be pretty hardcore. But if you wanted to face the fear, and then if it got too intense, you would probably cry. So those are all the feelings that you would kind of face. Then you would look at things like videos of diseases. That would probably be the most hardcore thing to face. And, you know, it could be a very short amount of time if it's too overwhelming, but that would be you facing the fear, and then probably there would be a lot of crying. And then that's how you would do it. You would do it little by little, all 10 seconds today, 20 seconds tomorrow. And then your body is getting used to the fear and, you know, all of that stuff. And then if you did it enough times, once you got comfortable with it, you pretty much kind of, will be the word, you kind of healed it, I think.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that actually leads to physical illness is repressed emotion. Repressed emotion in the body is that it can lead to chronic illness. That's part of why, doing this work is well, it's just another aspect of its benefit. But also, it's the ego's immense fear of death. The fear that arises from the idea that you might be ill is the ego freaking out that it's going to die, which is its nature, and that's completely normal. I've definitely had lots of hypochondria, and I remember even just like someone saying cancer or like speaking about it was like, "Don't do that, otherwise I'm going to get it." you know
Yeah.
don't make it normal to say it out loud, otherwise we're all going to get it. It's that level of the ego being like la 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 la. um and it's just a fear associated with with the ego's fear of death. So just exactly what Steve said, that um trying to be with it and let it come. And it might take a long time because that is a really strong fear. But then you can start to the more room that you get, the more you can start to play with it and let it, you know, be in you. So for example, with my example, you could maybe, I actually did this, was like people talking about their experience of having cancer, especially if they're young. That would freak me out too much. That would really make me feel like that was going to happen to me. Or if someone died when they were young, if I knew about it, then that was going to happen to me. So over time, I was able to, sort of almost exposure therapy myself into uh, hearing these things. It doesn't have to be like horrific necessarily, but like hearing real things and seeing what comes up, a lot of fear, a lot of sadness and tears. Um, and yeah, just like anything else, the very similar process. Um, and I think the manifestation part is another egoic trick that's just part of it. It's like let the ego convincing you that you're not that even to think about it is a bad idea. Otherwise, you'll give it to yourself. So
Yeah.
you best not even think about it.
Yeah, that's so funny. Um, death, the experience that you're afraid to die, it has everything to do with the ego dying in the mind.
Mhm.
And remember, the ego can't die all at once. There's just too much of it. But you have these ego deaths, which is actually another question for later. But um, what was I going to say? Ego death. I almost got it. It's something to do with like every time that something. Oh, okay, here I got it. The entire kind of awakening process is a closure. So you know how when people say they ended a romantic relationship, but it felt stuck, like there's something that's not processed. And so people will say, I don't feel like I got closure, which means a final ending, a complete ending, and then it's gone. And you can think of awakening and all of this healing, all of this release as closure, closure, closure. And so when there is a significant closure, which is an ego death, that will be experienced as you like you're going to feel like I'm about to die. That has happened to me so much. So it's like, oh, I'm going to drive now. And then there's this strong fear, and the thought is, I'm going to die in a car accident right now. And then there's even that spiritual thing, which is like, oh, I'm getting this information from the realms or from like, some spiritual entity that's telling me this to protect me. So maybe I shouldn't go. And that's happened to me a million times and nothing ever happened. So every time that a part of your ego is going to die, you think you're actually dying for real, which shows you the power of the ego in the mind. So it's like you look at your body, you might have even had a checkup and everything is perfect. That's reality, right? That's reality. You even feel fine. But your mind and the ego is so strong that if this thing, an image in your mind, dies, you think that that's the body dying. I mean, how crazy is that? It's just like your imagination. Imagine I sit here and then I imagine that there's like a dog dying, right? And then if I open my eyes and I get scared because I thought there was a dog here on the floor. I don't even have a dog. So it would be that kind of insanity. How could imagination make you feel so powerfully that the real you, this body, is going to die? So it shows you the influence that the ego has. The image of yourself in your mind is more real than your flesh and your blood, which is insane. Imagination feels more real than reality. I think that's crazy. Okay. Okay, so this is from Tony. Shame. I'm a very self-conscious person, seemingly from early childhood. I feel shame very easily whenever I'm criticized, disagreed with, not chosen, etc. But even when I get positive attention because I probably believe I don't deserve it. Even secondhand shame by watching other people or even movie characters doing something wrong or stupid is a very intense experience for me. Is it is it enough to stay with the sensations of shame whenever it comes up, or is there something more that I can do to heal this? So what you said there, I relate, completely, even watching movies, and I have that experience. I think it's much, much smaller now, but it can probably still happen for me. So I want to share this one specific thing that happened to me that kind of has made me face shame, and I didn't realize it was shame until it just kind of had the realization. So months ago, I was driving, and then you know how there's the stop sign, and pretty much nobody actually stops, 100% and goes. And if the police is sitting there, watching you, and you don't stop 100%, you're going to get a ticket. That's what happened to me. So the point of this is that because I knew that my driving habits, although I was not driving like a crazy person, there was a little bit of like um, anxiety when I was driving. I mean, that's the most common thing in the world. People are like, I want to get home, I want to get to the place that I'm going, and I want to get there quickly. So you're changing lanes and you're hating the drivers that are driving slowly. And so I knew that I had a little bit of that. And so I thought, if I've been stopped by the police and I got this ticket, this is an opportunity. I mean, I had a giant amount of rage, by the way. I had like a demonic explosion in the car, obviously when I was alone. So I'm not saying that it was easy, but after I thought to myself, this is an opportunity for me to change how I drive. Because if I'm someone that wants well-being and peace, driving kind of crazy, that's not peace. So I'm literally practicing anxiety. So what did I do? I said every stop sign I'm going to stop the way that nobody wants to stop. And then what happened, which is related to the shame. If there's a car behind me and I know you can see that they're impatient, sometimes they're even close, they're tailgating you. For me to stop and do the full stop, I would feel this thing that I later realized was shame. Because shame is the expectation of punishment. And so what I was in my body, what I was feeling is if I stop 100%, this person is going to get really angry, right? They're going to do something. And so every single time that I've had to stop and there's somebody behind me, I was forced to feel shame. And at the first, I don't know, 100 times, it was horrible because as I was slowing down, something in me was almost like, just don't do it, and just go because this is unbearable. And I later realized, holy crap, this is shame. And so that shows you that exposure, which means something that makes you feel it over and over, eventually leads to it kind of going away. So I calculate probably 100 times that I did that, and there was no difference. I felt it horribly every time. But now I've noticed that it's almost gone. So I still kind of see that there's somebody behind me, but it's almost gone. So I think the most important thing that I said is exposure. The only tricky thing is to do it with something that's not like insanely difficult for you that maybe you just won't be able to do over and over. And then let me see if there's something else here. Um, I mean, and all of that is so normal because you said I feel shame if you're criticized, disagreed with, or even if you have positive attention. And I'm trying to think of why y you would feel shame because I've had the same thing. Oh, it's almost like if somebody, oh, this is a good one. Um, this is particularly also abusive of a parent to do this. Um, let's say that you're a child and an adult, like your uncle says, "Wow, you're very smart," or you're looking good. And then the parent says something that puts you down in that moment. Like, "Oh, they're not as smart as you think, like he cheated," or something like that. That is a terrible moment. So that could be the source of it, that you were praised and somebody literally in that moment shamed you and said you shouldn't be praised. You don't deserve this praise. So I think that's what creates that. And it sucks, but it's normal. And let's see, secondhand shame. Yeah, I experienced that. Um, oh, it made me think if you can find videos of embarrassing things, I'm sure there are videos like that on the internet, like cringe, like
Mm,
cringy. Um,
yeah.
that can make you, that's a good practice. And then notice what happens and how unbearable it is. And remember, if it's very, very like difficult, just do it for 10 seconds and then you increase it. Like, for example, for me, this is like a good example. We're recording this Q&A. This is the second one. So when I clicked on the first Q&A to see myself, or any other video that I've been in lives or whatever, I do have a little bit of that. So there's still something that says, I look bad. Why did I say it that way? All of this stuff. And so I forced myself to watch a lot of it, a lot of it. And so there's these little peaks of, ooh, I shouldn't have said that. This didn't look good. And then after a while, I just got used to it. But I believe that I still have to do more. But I think the most important thing to hear is that in the beginning, it's difficult, but once you get used to it, you're like, my God, how was this ever difficult? It's almost like nothing. So that's the potential of this, right?
Yeah. And then taking it, what you said, Steve, about the like, it's a very safe way to explore it is with videos that trigger cringe in you. That's a very like surface level thing. But again, like embodying the character that is full of shame or embarrassment. I think it's embarrassment that goes with the like positive things. It's like a lot of attention and then like all the spotlights on me. I feel embarrassed. Like I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. It's a fear of being judged again, but for like being good or like not being good at being good.
Yeah.
Like uh maybe you have to like I'm just thinking of school because it's such a hotbed environment for these kind of things. Like you've done something well in class and you have to stand up, walk to the front of the class and receive like something. And the attention's all on you. And then you have to like there's the anxiety of like doing it right, taking it, like having a picture or whatever. But when you get into the rhythm of like doing these characters, like as in embodying like everything, you can really explore. I mean, imagine how funny it gets to the point where you're able to like be like an absolute cringe lord, like in your own safety of your own home. Like think if you think of things that are like very humiliating, honestly, if you're honest, like what makes me feel humiliated in front of someone, and then just like doing it and just being safe in doing it, is an immensely powerful practice. Um, I mean, something that I've done is like doing things in front of the mirror, like as if like I'm speaking to someone, and then like I can see like how embarrassing it looks if I respond a certain way, like a really exaggerated, like goofy way or something, like dancing like an idiot. But like you're really pushing it to just like see how just what comes up because the more that you sort of push it, the more that will come up, and you're actually seeing the depths of what's there. Um, but yeah, I think starting with the sort of triggering videos is a great one.
Yeah, and I just thought that because shame is this expectation that like I have this image of like don't hit me. So you're like literally doing this cowering because you're afraid to be hit. And hit could be physically or just with words, something very cruel. And I think that healing shame, and it could take years because depending on how much it, of how much it happened to you. But what was I going to say? That what's happening when you expose yourself to moments that make you feel shame is that you're slowly learning that when you do it, nothing bad actually happens. Even though in the beginning it could be horrible, and then you could almost think like this is bad enough that I don't want to feel this. But then if you keep going, your whole nervous system is kind of getting used to the fact that you do something and then you don't die. Basically, that's what like oh if I did something in front of someone, I mean that's the highest level, so that'd be very difficult in front of other people. But if you said something, so an example could be when you're starting to um, own the fact that you have so much anger and rage, and then it could be at your father or your mother. Even to say the words, I hate my mom or I hate my dad, even if you've never said it in your life, even to say that, there could be shame there. Why? Because the moment that you say it, or even as you're imagining it and you're about to say it, there is that same sensation that you don't want to feel. If I say it, I'm going to be hit. Somebody's going to hit me. And so even something like that, you're by yourself. If it's difficult, where you're almost like, I can't say it, I can't say it, then you know that that's a really good one to eventually kind of say it and then see what happens. You're not going to die. And so I think healing shame is basically like showing yourself over and over that when you feel shame, you don't die. That's literally, I think, what's happening.
Yeah. One more thing that I just remembered that in my experience would come up the more comfortable I was becoming with, um, these exercises and shame and cringe and things like this. Memories would come up that I'd locked away that were shameful. Things that I'd done that I deemed as being shameful would come up, and they would be quite potent because I'd allowed access to them now, not through choosing, but through doing this work. And I had to realize that that's what was happening and stay with it because it would be really uncomfortable to let the whole memory play out, especially if it's something that I had done that I just thought was so shameful or whatever it was. And then for me, that's when, the real processing come because that was linked to these actual memories. And uh, yeah, just allowing them to play all the way through. but there being a lot of resistance, it would come up and be like, oh, no, 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 no. But then spotting it and allowing it to come, and then there'd be contractions and then release, and that can be expected as well.
Yeah. And just one more thing, and I think it is for all emotions and shame. The reason that it seems often impossible to heal something like shame, I think we like to be as direct as possible, even if it's disappointing. If you were shamed a lot, imagine that it would take you feeling shame 1,000 times. So, if you're at a party and somebody says something to you and then you blush because you're so embarrassed, that was just one. So why does it seem impossible to heal it? Because first of all, if you're not even if you don't even have the desire to heal it, you're probably going to feel it very rarely, right? You might even avoid situations. So you feel it here and you feel it there. So if you imagine that it's 1,000, that you would have to feel it 1,000 times for it to be gone, you're never going to get even close if you're not even trying to feel it, right? So what we said, look for videos. This is an active thing. It's like I'm choosing to face my shame, and even if you choose to face it, how long would it take if it's 1,000, right? Let's just having that number. It's going to take years. And so this is why people often say that healing is a trap. This is like one of the most like narcissistic things that you can say to your pain, which is you're just a trap, right? That you don't have any pain. It's just an illusion. It's going to last forever. No, it means that there's so much that if you felt it 20 times, 50 times, 200 times, you might not see any difference. And then you're going to say, oh, it's never going to end. If you have what is that expression where there's a will, there's a way? And so if you have the will to see it to the very end, it might take years. Let's say it takes 5 years. But from now, and then imagine you're at year 5 and you're like, oh my God, I don't experience shame anymore. It doesn't exist anymore in my experience. That is still incredible, even if it took 5 years, right?
Yeah. Another quick thought that came to my mind is also that Tony's saying that shame does come very easy and always has. Um, it's also possible or probable that that is what's maybe a safe emotion for you in those moments, but is keeping a lid on the buried anger as well. Um, so, there might be shame that's there as something that's available, um, that's keeping a lid on what's really underneath. And from what you've told us in your post so far, that maybe uh, it's the beginning of getting to the real buried rage. Um, so in conjunction with what we've said, and then also like maybe seeing if there's anger there in the same kind of way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is Elena. So intense love feeling. I have heard from people who are in the process of spiritual awakening, and they start to feel a very strong feeling of love only after they manage to dissolve some of the emotional pain. In my case, this is how the awakening began. With a very strong emotion of love. I felt a love that I had never felt before, so strong that I melted into it for a few seconds. I couldn't move at all. I then got scared, almost had a panic attack, and my nervous system immediately shut down. It was far too strong and unknown to keep feeling it. The feeling was insane. I thought God was in my body. And after this feeling, I started to cry almost every day. Is this normal or I started backwards? What really happened in my nervous system then? Well, I would say first that, so many different things can happen. Each person, will experience it differently. But that's an example of so when you first came into contact with this love, um, maybe I would describe it as a moment. So imagine that we think so much, we live in the world of the mind, even though we have the five senses, but we're so much in the mind that it's odd to say that we're not in the body because ultimately you can't. You always are in the body. You are the body. But you can have this experience that you're not. So you're looking at, a park, but your mind is consumed by thinking. You're almost I'm sure people have had this experience where if you go so deep into thinking that you start seeing scenes in your mind, you will notice that you actually didn't see your vision. So somehow you couldn't see what was right in front of you. So this shows you that this moment of this unbelievable love is a moment where perhaps you were in the body, the way that an animal always is the body. And what's incredible is that, our natural state, the way that we were born, is so magnificent that when you have a taste of it, it feels like what she said. She said, I felt that I can't find it, that God was in my body. That's how unbelievable it was. Actually, that's a feeling of being in the body. You know, people are trying to escape to some spiritual realm. They want to die so that they can get to the afterlife because their bodily experience feels so poor. It doesn't feel like anything. When you have these glimpses, you're actually seeing that to be in the body is the most incredible experience, right? So I think that's what you experience there. And then let's see if I can add anything. Um, you said like, is it normal? Absolutely everything is normal, right? That's why we can't compare how one awakening happens to, one person to the other. Um, and I do think that when we come into contact, let's just call it love, that you said love, it opens, it's almost like a light. Yeah, that's a good analogy. So imagine that there's this place full of darkness, right? You could even call it demons, just filled with these beings. The moment that you're in the body, that you feel this intense love, it's like a light for a few seconds, the light of what you really are. You could experience it, but then what happens is that light shines on a little bit of the darkness, almost like a dirty room, and suddenly you can see stuff, right? A lot of fear, a lot of panic. So this happens on the journey a lot where you can feel intense bliss and ecstasy, and that experience can actually trigger more pain. It's almost the contrast. It hits more pain, and then you feel this stuff.
Yeah, and it makes sense that with a bit of emotional processing, that maybe there was uh, a little bit of time there where the activity of the mind has subsided and your attention that's always there was completely placed on the body, which in contrast to it always being on the chatter of the mind will be like ecstasy. To have your full attention on the bodily sensation versus having it always spotlit on the endless painful chatter of the mind is, especially when the contrast is that vivid, from going from one to the other. It's going to be a huge experience feeling that compared to that. Um, so yeah, makes total sense, I think.
Yeah. And maybe I was just going to say, whether it's this intense love or an intense peace, because that is very different. Love feels like this very dramatic, godly love. And then peace feels very dead, but in a good way. And I was going to say, it's almost like the nervous system has to get used to being that way. And that's why this awakening is so long, because I remember when I had moments like that. And I didn't share it with anybody, but if you did, they would think that you're completely crazy, right? So I was in the park and it just got more intense and more intense. And so I was looking at everything with this like unbelievable love. And I saw this like Japanese family. And then I started crying because I was like, wow, don't they know that they're love and we're just all loving, And I was crying because of that. And in reality, that's just you getting used to that, and it's not always going to be that way. Eventually you kind of, I mean, that still happens even to me, but it becomes less and less and less because you got used to it, which is you just basically getting used to I don't know if it's a sensation of love. And then later on is when peace is more rare at that stage, but you can have glimpses, and you'll see that it's so different to love because like I said, love feels like this dramatic bliss, and then peace is just this silence. And when it started happening to me at the very beginning, my mind was saying that this peace that you're feeling is called insanity. Like you're going crazy because you can't, the mind can't be this silent. That's crazy people, right? You have to have this talking for you to be a normal person. And so the process is very long for that reason. It's like if you have, if it were possible, here's a little bit of peace, right? And some people, if they experience a little bit of peace, they're going to go crazy and they're going to have psychosis. And so that's why this process is in stages. It has to be. It's too overwhelming. Okay. So this is another Elena. Elena, I'm not sure if it's Assam, accessing anger. I've had a difficult time accessing feeling anger since as long as I can remember. I can feel frustrated and irritated, sure, but anger seems to be something that I can't access, feel, express. As I mentioned in my intro, I've gone through deep with most emotions, and yes, I did experience fear around anger. Sorry, oh, feel angry around angry people as a child, but I'm wondering if there is actual anger deep down in me somewhere, or might there be people that just don't have a lot of anger in them? I've been in safe spaces where the goal was to express, release anger, rage, but I had to fake it. I'm open to the idea that there is a deep fear that blocks me, but I've been very loving, patient with that part of my subconscious to help it to come to the surface, but nothing has come from it. I don't feel like I'm a ticking bomb when it comes to that emotion either. I don't drink alcohol anymore, but it has never come up when under the influence in the past either. Is there a possibility that I just don't have a lot of anger in me? Or might it be so deeply blocked, repressed that I can't sense it at all? Yes. So definitely, especially if I'm guessing that it has been, you know that it's been suppressed your whole life, which is exactly like me. And so I've got a lot of experience with this, so I can tell you a few things that even more recently, I'll give you an example. This is kind of how the mind works, how consciousness works with this stuff. So, if you know, she was listening to the beginning, when the police stopped me and they gave me a ticket, right? I felt so powerless because there's nothing you can do, right? They're an authority and you don't want to make it any worse, right? You don't want to be taken to jail. So I felt utterly powerless. There comes the police officer and he says, give me, driver's license, whatever. And then he's writing the ticket. And I literally couldn't do anything. I said something like, is there no way? Like, is there no way? Like, can you just, a warning? And he said no. And he wrote the ticket. So I'm going to walk you through what happened in there. So I felt powerless. I didn't like the feeling. But in that moment, I still couldn't feel the anger. So the anger came a few minutes later. So that happened. I felt powerless. I didn't like it. Then he went away and I drove off. And then very slowly, I started to feel anger, but it was like tiny, tiny, tiny. And then I'm like, okay, let me give attention to this. And then I had done it so much that I have to say that I've done a lot of rage exercises, so it comes very easily for me. But I'm trying to show you how it can be very deceptive, that it's like, oh, I don't have much anger. So when I parked the car, I was with my mom and I told her, "Can you please, walk in front of me because I'm gonna have to literally explode here in the car." And of course, nobody can be around. So she went for her walk, and then I kind of and then it started coming, and it was like an atomic bomb. Remember, like I just said, I've opened myself up to the rage. And so it went from like this thing, and right before it started to get big, I literally thought, I think there's not much of it because I couldn't feel it. I literally was like, maybe I'm just like mildly annoyed. And suddenly it was like a switch. And at this point, I had done so much rage exercise that to me, there's no limit. There's nothing that I can't do in my mind. So I screamed at the loudest that I could scream, and I said things like that I wish I could kill the officer, like kill his whole family. And I just became that rage, that violence. And it took me three explosions. So I had to breathe after the first explosion, then do the second one and the third one. By the time I did the third one, which I screamed and I did this whole thing with my body, it suddenly disappeared. And so I even was kind of like, is it like gone that quickly? Like it can't be. Like I wasn't even feeling upset anymore about the ticket. It was just gone. And so I wanted to share that to show you how consciousness works. It can seem 100% like, oh, I don't have much. And then if you're open enough, suddenly you're like, oh my God, this is how it works. If I'm open enough, I realize that there's actually like this mountain. Um, the other thing that I want to say is, so she said she's been to retreats, so this is particularly difficult for her. Like it's very, very suppressed if she went to a retreat. So it's good that you try to fake it because you're trying, right? But what I would say is this. First, there's so much rage, and therefore, eventually, if you have the interest, the curiosity, and the will to kind of keep looking, it has to come up because it is there, right? It's not fantasy, it's not imagination, it's there. And so, what I would do is I would become curious about it and see it as something that's going to take a long time. So, there's no pressure. Throughout your day, notice if you're getting annoyed at things. Like you said, I can get irritated. And then play with faking it because something tells me if you do it enough times, there's like this energy and it's like it's kind of blocked. And then you're playing and you're faking it and you're faking it. But if even the desire to see it already does something. It's almost like our whole body and nervous system knows. You're almost commanding it in a way. I want to see it. It might take a while, but if you keep trying, I think that's the key with this entire journey is you keep trying. If you get bored of it, whatever it is, if you want to stop a little bit, stop, but then continue, right? Take a few days off if you're like, I've had enough of this, but you always have to go back. The only way that something is going to move is this constant going back to it. And so play with it. Even like, I don't know if she did that in the retreat, but like having an explosion of like that, like your body suddenly doing something like that. And even if it feels fake, it doesn't matter because I'm telling you, it's going to eventually arise. So this has to do with having the curiosity and the patience over a long period to keep coming back to the same topic and making an angry face and all of what would this, even if it's fake, what would an angry person say? Right? So I've spoken to her before. I think she's married. She has a husband. I'm sure there are things that he does that are going to like trigger some irritation. So what if he said something to you, you notice that you're irritated, then he can't hear you, he can't see you. Even if it feels fake, why don't you say something really, really bad? Right? Like, I effing hate you. I wish you would, fall down the stairs. That's pretty bad. But something extreme that you've never said before. So I think this is very important.
To yourself, by the way.
To yourself, exactly. Just to say that again. This is all of this stuff is always done alone because if somebody hears you, that's not good, right? This is done completely alone. You know that they cannot hear you and they can't see you. Um, so what I was going to say is if you've never said something that bad or evil, right? I hope you fall down the stairs. I hope you die. Maybe if he's going to drive, that's really, really intense. I know, but I'm saying this because of the level of what seems to be the suppression. So maybe you need something a little bit more extreme. So if you even try that in your mind and you are met with immense resistance, like if he can't hear you and see you, but you could say it out loud, like you're going to use your voice, like I wish you would die, I wish something like that. If immediately you find yourself not even being able to say the words out loud, then you've hit gold, which means that, oh, this is what I don't want to say. So there could be shame. We've talked about shame, which is if I say this, am I going to be attacked? Is something horrible going to happen to me? And so if there is fear, if there's great resistance, that is the way to go. And again, if it's overwhelming, do it slowly, stop, but come back to it, and then see if you can take it deeper. What I do nowadays, because there's like pretty much no resistance anymore, I do it in real time. So if I'm with someone and they did something to me, it doesn't matter if it doesn't even make sense, right? They didn't even do anything bad, but to me, I didn't like it. I'll literally turn around and they're in the same space with me, and I'll say silently like something with my mouth, like I hate you or something like that. But they can't hear it, of course. And so that's how I think you start unraveling this thing.
Yeah. And So the thing about seeing whether resistance is an exercise in honesty, because it also doubles up as like you can start to see whether your ego, as in your sense of self, really has a thing about not being an angry person. Because even the way that you sort of worded the question is almost like uh not necessarily wanting to be seen as not an angry person, but like you can experiment with that. Like, is there a desire in your ego, your sense of self, to not be angry, to not be seen as angry? These kind of things. Is being angry bad? And with these mild irritations, I always see them as like, uh, I imagine like the ground and there's like something poking up like here, and this is an irritation, this tiny thing above the surface. But then when you like start to pull at it, there's like all this immense like roots and everything like down here. So you could just, if something irritates you, notice it and then just stay with it a bit longer. Like, how much did it really irritate you? What could you say that sort of fulfills that irritation a bit more than normal? Like,
Yeah.
if it could be like you drop a mug on the floor and it shatters. Oh, that's slightly annoying. But then, is it really fucking annoying? Do you want to fucking kill someone because that happens? But these things obviously won't be accessible immediately. Um, so I want to put the emphasis on like experimenting with the honesty side of things, and seeing where there's resistance in sort of saying things that you are, like even saying I am a really angry person. Like, do you feel some resistance to that? Do you feel some contraction of like, oh, I wouldn't want to be seen as an angry person or something like that? Because these are all indications that there's, a lot to explore. Um, and I think
And
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, from what you said, there's a fairly high degree of certainty that there's a lot of suppressed rage to access.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is that, you know, I think everyone that has a really big problem with anger, and especially if you suppressed it. So there are people that kind of become very aggressive, and then there are people who never show any anger, right? That's usually because the person that abused you was extremely aggressive, and therefore, if you showed any anger, that would be very dangerous, right? So what your ego probably does not want is for you to become your abuser.
Yeah.
So I would actually use the word violence instead of, there are certain things that in each person's psyche, like certain words might not work, might not hit a resistance, but it's like, what if you say I'm a violent person, right? Because that could be the same word that you would describe the person that abused you, and you think that, oh, I could never be that person. And so that's one big resistance. Um, and then the other thing I was going to say about the reason why going to a retreat and smacking something, right? Or probably will have no effect, is because there's nothing real happening. So if you just have a bunch of women in a forest or something and it's like start hitting and screaming, that's almost nothing. Unless somebody has a lot of something just happened to them and then they scream, that would work. But if
Mm.
nothing real has happened, it's very fake, because if you're with your husband, like I was saying about Elena, that is real and that is in the moment. And that has a very different effect. So if somebody said something to you, irritated you, and they walked away, and then that may make you even more angry that they didn't even give you a chance to speak. In that moment, it's fresh. It's fresh. But if you try to create rage with nothing, nothing moves. And
Uh,
so I would say that that's the key. In the exact moment, can you, if your husband does something or say something, can you go in that moment to the bathroom and silently, if he's in the house, say something to him that you wish you could say, that we said, like F you, or and maybe do that with a physical, because maybe you don't want to be seen as a violent person, and then that could start moving things.
yeah. 100% about the live. I had the retreat thing highlighted as well, as it has to come from a genuine trigger. It's like live electricity, or imagine like you actually have a flame to light a fire with the trigger. On a retreat, it might happen that there might be a trigger, but if there's no trigger, then you can't work with it. And if you haven't accessed real triggers to anger yet at all, then there's no way that you could access real anger. Um, there's one other thing. No, I think it's gone. Um,
And I was just going to add one more. Oh, and I was going to say I forgot to, I don't know how long it's been.
um,
Oh, did you?
I started recording at the time after the first question, and it's 45 minutes after that, but it's okay. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
one thing I was going because I know her a little bit. So what I wanted to say is that um within the spiritual community, even, she likes to use the word soul. I'm not going to
yeah,
get into that, but I think that there is this image that the soul, the higher self, is this absolutely loving thing that could never be an abuser, that could never be this violent, evil person. And what I want to say about that is, I said it in the first Q&A, the most powerful love, if you want to call it that, which is the only love there isn't like higher and lower, but I have to use words. The pure love that you think is the soul's love or God's love is so strong that it is a container, and it will never judge even a psychopath, even the worst possible human being, even Adolf Hitler. There is no limit. That love holds anything inside. That is what unconditional love is. So there is a lot of hesitation in the spiritual community to go a little bit too deep in the darkness, because there's this idea that only if I'm kind and loving am I being love. And I'll say it again, like in the first Q&A, that love is like very, very shallow, because real love is so strong that it can look evil in the eye, and it's just going to look at it. It's not, it can't judge it. It can't have any thoughts about it. It will just look at it. And in fact, in the looking, it is embracing it and saying, I don't judge you. You're just pain that I'm going to love. Right.
yeah. I just remembered what I had forgotten, which is in my experience with anger, I said this in the last one as well, that I noticed that I judged angry people or people expressing anger a lot. But then on top of that, I also wouldn't accept in my ego that that was true, and would think that I wasn't someone that judged angry people because I didn't want to be a judgmental person. So you could also check in with yourself if that on any level is true. Do you not want to be seen as judgmental? That's pretty much everyone. But beneath that is their judgment. Like if you see someone who's angry, do you think they're like silly, pathetic, um, undisciplined, anything like this? Can be very helpful because if any of that's true, then the finger is, pointing back. Um, Another thing you could check is did you not like the answer that we gave? Because because uh, that could also be helpful. If there's a lot of no, 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 that's not me, then um,
You could even direct your hate at us.
yeah, yeah, of course.
When you're alone, those idiots.
Yeah, yeah, that's completely true. I mean, anyone, but especially us. Okay.
So then I'll go to the next one. Okay. I like this one. So this is Tony again. So release versus integration. I was wondering, what is the difference between those two concepts with regards to emotional processing? It seems to me, sorry, I just have to open it more. It seems to me like when we are focused on releasing emotional energy, we are just letting emotions out with the aim of relief. On the other hand, integration seems to be more nuanced intention, seeking not only relief, but also growth and understanding. It involves trying to incorporate the perspective that birthed the suppressed emotion into the larger whole of our psyche in a harmonious way. It would be very interesting to hear what Joe and Steve have to say about this and how important they think it is to understand why we are suffering and how we can embody the new perspectives that emerge as we release long held emotions without needing to purge them over and over again, but instead ground ourselves in a more expanded perception that creates a different emotional experience altogether. So I remember reading this one. I thought about this a little bit. So in the way that maybe you're phrasing it, then it would be two separate things. Although I would say that releasing emotions is integration. So maybe talk a little bit about that. So, integration is the idea that you're broken, like so that you have all these pieces, and then it's kind of tricky, but it's like you have this thing that's you, and there are these parts that are missing, and then this is integration. Here's one more part, here's one more part, here's one more part. Um, but the first thing is that the word relief can have two meanings here. So maybe there's a little misunderstanding that the whole point is just to feel better in the moment. So it's like, I'm just going to cry so I can feel better. And yes, that does happen. That is a result of crying and releasing all of that pain. But the point is not to just get relief in the moment, because then that would just be, I mean, that can happen, but it would almost just be, I'm going to cry so that I don't feel this, right? So that's not really the intention. But what I want to stress with that is, and then I'll go to the integration part, is that the reason why processing emotions, releasing them, is the most important thing is because this is not a spiritual thing. This is not some transcendent thing. We're literally talking almost scientifically of the body and the nervous system. And the fact that the three emotions, I don't know if I'm missing one, but it's the sadness, the anger, and the fear, which most of it is released. So anger, you have to feel it in the body, but then almost all of it is just crying. Those were moments in your life since you were very, very small that, let's say sadness, there was sadness. This is an electrical charge in your body. This is not a spiritual thing. So imagine there's like this shock. A baby just cries without thinking. They can't think. So there's the shock and the release, the shock and the release. And then as we are conditioned and we are around our parents and people, we start learning that it's dangerous to have these releases. But the shocks never stop. You can never stop feeling emotions in the body because it's part of being this body. And so what happens is if right now I'm a 5-year-old kid and my mother rejects me, my father does something, and I feel this horrible sensation, that's the electrical shock in this moment. But I've learned to hold in my tears. So the electrical shock hasn't been released. And again, this is not some imagination. An electrical shock cannot just disappear without being released. So it goes into the brain, it goes into the whole body. And so what you're literally doing is like going back in time and correcting what should have happened, which is releasing, right? Now, the integration part, I know what you mean by this, which is you're not just crying and crying and crying. And for example, you're a people pleaser and you let people abuse you and all this stuff. And then you just cry and cry and cry and you don't change anything in your life, right? Well, the thing is that as this process happens, this is what some people call downloads, or I would call just realizations, mental realizations. You have this like, oh my God, I can see this now, right? I didn't see this. So the example of people pleasing or an abusive relationship. Let's say that you, just to use Tony because he's in the example. Let's say that he's in a relationship with a woman who's abusive, right? She's always like putting him down, and now you know this. You know that you're kind of people pleasing, you're allowing the abuse. And let's say that you're crying now. So like she says something like horrible and then you cry. We are not suggesting that all you do is cry, 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 and then you just stay with this person and there's no change in your behavior. The more that you cry, the more that you will have the realizations like, oh my God, I've been with this person this whole time because I'm afraid to be lonely, I'm afraid to feel emotions. And then eventually, it is impossible for this to not happen. If you're crying a lot, there will be a day, there will be a moment where you're like, "Oh my God, today's the day that I end this relationship." You won't be able to stop yourself. It will almost be like somebody's doing it for you. Some people would say like, an entity or something is doing it to you, but it's ultimately just you. So the integration, which is, I just want to see how he said it, intention seeking, growth and understanding. So the release of emotions inevitably results in changes in behavior, boundaries, like endless things will change. Um, And I want to address the part that says, because that was it's an important one. So it's I'll just read it again. So it said how important it is to understand why we are suffering and how we can embody the new perspective without needing to purge them over and over. So that's that without needing to purge them over and over. I already said the electrical charge. I explained all that. Um, that itself is a little tiny resistance to feeling emotions, which means that they're still difficult to feel. Because I've said this, if they were easy to feel, why would you ever even think of resisting them in the first place? It would be easy. It would almost be a pleasure, right? If it's a pleasure to cry, pleasure to have anger, I mean, kind of. It becomes fun, right? For you to finally own all of the stuff that you've been holding in. So it does become fun. It becomes almost pleasurable. You would never ask that, right? To say without needing to purge them over and over. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo your point about the integration and release are just uh, two sides of the same coin, you could say. So the process of releasing leads to the integration. You know, your repressed emotions are what prevent you from seeing reality and seeing you get a clearer and clearer image of what you've been doing this whole time and what's happening now, the more and more that you do this. And the insights that you get are about the truth of the situation because you're no longer you're less consumed by your oppressed emotions that feed your mental activity. So you cannot have a understanding deeper than the tears that you've cried. They are completely interlinked. So you can't say, oh, you know, I will cry this at some point, but I would like to understand and grow. Because again, the some of the terminology used, like you know, growth and understanding, it's kind of like trying to polish this self, this, you know, the self-image of I don't mean explicitly in a vain way, but it's like this I want to be more knowledgeable about all of this. And that can only, it's useless, honestly. On a mental level, there might be some intellectual understanding of what's being said about something that you haven't understood so far. But as long as it's an intellectual exercise, it does nothing for healing, and it only serves as a distraction. Actually, honestly, it will take you down the wrong path to have a mental picture or supposed understanding that isn't a physical understanding of what's happening. Will feed it will satisfy the egoic need for you know, knowledge, I suppose, and it will just distract and distract away, which in a way the sort of question is as Steve said is a very cleverly disguised, can I do it without doing it? You know.
Yeah.
Um, and that might be difficult to hear because the actual understanding the that you may want will only ever come in truth, as in like the real understanding, as in the lived experience, and the same will only ever come through the processing. Just think of it as like a completely interlocked system where the crying, the realization, and the understanding are all together, and they will all deepen together, and they cannot be separated.
Yeah, and I something that you said about what I was going to say is that the reason why it's impossible for you to connect deeper and deeper with your pain and your emotions and to not have profound changes in understanding and therefore change your entire life and take actions is because I don't want to lose it. I'm going to remember. It's because like I'm going to give the same scenario. So imagine the Tony and he has a wife or a girlfriend that is abusive, right? But let's say that Tony up until now can't really feel emotions. Like you can always feel something. It's very uncomfortable, but if it's very numbed, you're feeling like 5% of the emotion. right? So it's not very dramatic, it's not very painful. And so when someone is extremely cruel to you, you're going to feel unpleasant, right? But you're disconnected from your emotions. And therefore, if you're disconnected from your emotions, you will stay there because your mind is saying, this is not that bad. This is
Mm.
not wonderful, but this is not that bad. But what if I take that 5% that you can only feel five and I increase it to 50? Now you're feeling the depth of what it feels like when someone just puts you down and says horrible things about you. Instead of 5%, now you're hit with 50. And when you're hit with 50, and then maybe if you're crying, when somebody does that to you, it's going to hurt so much like you were just burned that then if it happens again, you can't keep going. It's almost like I'm not going to be able to stand much more of this now that I can feel so much, now that I realize that I'm being deeply, deeply hurt here. And so that's why it would be unbearable. And then even if it took a little while, it would be weeks if it got, and it could get worse and worse as the person kept abusing you. And then after a week or two, you would literally feel like you're forced and you're like, you know what?
Mm.
I've had enough of this and I cannot be abused anymore. And then it would be over. So that's an example. And believe me, once you get to 100, that's usually in when you get insanely sensitive on the spiritual journey. And this is usually the time when people start protecting their energy and then they get stuck in that where they're avoiding everything, thinking that it's everybody's negative energy. And this happened to me when I would, it was so funny to remember it now. Like my dad would send me a video, and my emotions were so heightened that I felt so much fear. It was so intense, and I still was running away from, feeling things. And I thought, oh, this feels so bad. I'm not even going to open the video to protect my energy so that and then later on what I did because I got tired of that was I'm gonna do it on purpose now. I'm gonna watch horror movies. I'm gonna see things to really feel it. And at first it's like a nightmare because you're like the electrical charge is like at a million, right? You're just scared. But eventually you get used to it.
Yeah. And another quick thought that came to mind to sort of illustrate what I meant by the insight and the purging and release being intertwined is because the process of releasing these buried emotions or repressed emotions is the process of you could say dissolving the ego. Or and the more that you do it, the more you see through it. So you can only gain an insight when you see more of what's there, and that can only happen by releasing the repressed emotions. So if you imagine your ego as this sort of like very opaque layer, and every time you release emotions, repressed emotions. I mean, one time will make it's like but imagine you do it many, many times and the opacity goes down 1%. You can see through it 1% more. That means you can see more of what actually is there. You'll see things that you didn't know and realize things that you didn't know are true. And it's not possible to see through a brick wall, you know.
Yeah.
So hopefully that sort of visual gives a bit clearer picture of what I was trying to describe.
Yeah, that was good. Um, and then how are we for time?
Check. We are over an hour, but maybe we could do one or two more.
Okay. So the ego death one. Okay. This is Elena. So it is possible, or is it possible to have an ego death many times? The last time I felt that immense pain, I felt like the person that I cried for was gone forever. I remember mourning him and saying out loud, "No, please stay here. Don't go. I love you so much." And I've said this over and over again, and I felt like my skin was being ripped from me. That's why I think it was an ego death because it felt like a goodbye forever. But I stopped because it was too painful. Maybe that's why it was so painful. So my questions are, what was that an ego death? And then is it possible that this particular situation will be back until it remains nothing there? Like it will be a part two in that particular ego death. So I said this to Joe before. So ego death, it's funny how I think that even I may be wrong, but there are people that think there's just one. And that's the ego convincing you, oh, don't look at this stuff anymore, right? Some people say, oh, I've had my ego death. And it's like, that was just one. There's like thousands, probably thousands of parts. So thousands of ego deaths from, let's say, from the beginning to fully enlightened. So there's probably 1,000 or more. And um,
And you can call it an ego death experience as well, because it's
yes.
like it's an aspect. The thing I said about the ego itself becoming a bit less opaque. Every time that happens, it's less recognizable as itself, and part of it's gone. And that could be like an ego death experience, or the experience for a moment that the self that you know or believe to be there isn't present for a moment. But the permanent ego death, real ego death, is when it's gone and is never coming back. But yeah, as Steve said, that this experience is a frequent, a frequent one and an inevitable one that comes back time and time again.
Yeah, and I was going to add that you could think of every emotional release as an ego death, but I think what is much more significant that people would consider an ego death is when it is something very, very extreme that happened. So she said, I felt um, my skin was being ripped from me, or, I think I talked about it before, how there were certain moments, and they may still happen to me. I think it happened today, but it doesn't happen all the time. So I could cry like 100 times, and it might happen like twice. So you could call those 100 ego deaths if you want to call it little emotional releases. But then when something really big happens, right? Something that involves someone, like if you heal something, if you have a conversation, for example, with your mother or father, and they admit something to you, like they hurt you and they've never done this. And then you felt in that moment absolutely loved by them for the very first time. And then you go home and then you cry and you cry. It's like that part of you, or maybe a bigger chunk of your ego, finally got what it wanted, which was love. And then it's dying, right? So for me, every single time a major one of these has happened, every time I thought I was going to die for real. So I thought, today's the day that I die if I go outside, and I actually wouldn't. And I was like, whatever. I'm afraid. I just let myself be afraid. I was like, I'd better not drive because maybe I'll die right now. So that would be a more classic ego death. A part of maybe a bigger part of the ego is dying, and therefore you feel like you're actually dying. You might feel like you're going to have a heart attack. Even if your heart is racing, that's what I thought the first time. My heart is going so fast, I'm out of here. Like I'm literally done. And the other thoughts that also come with ego death is because it seems like you're going to die today or in a few minutes, you're going to have weird thoughts like, I don't want to say goodbye to the people that I love. Like I want to stay here. Like I plan to travel and I plan to do this, but I don't want to die. So you have these weird experiences of you're perfectly healthy, but somehow in your mind you're like, I'm going to die and I want to live much longer. That would be a classic ego death.
Yeah. And just to make it crystal clear that the ego is still very much there,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and it's an enormous, enormous thing that um just takes a very, very, very long time to change.
Yeah. I think I in one of my videos to have like a visualization of the ego would be these like metal boxes, but then the entire ego. Imagine that these little square metal boxes are little parts of the ego, right? And you can have one category. For example, all of your tears will be 3,000 boxes. And then you have your rage, another 2,000, fear, like all of the, thousands and thousands. So you have all these little metal boxes and they're all stacked on top of each other. But you can't open all of them at once. It's just not possible. So sometimes fear will be triggered and you open a little box. There could be bigger boxes. So those could be um, bigger amounts of the ego. So that's when you feel something very extreme. So that could be a classic ego death. But even if you eliminated, so for me, I've cried like 1,000 times and all this stuff. Who knows? Maybe I did 30% up until now, 30% of the ego. So the 30% of these metal boxes, and I already experience like life in a way that I never thought possible. But I still see that there's so much more pain to feel.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. It's like you got rid of, let's say there's like 7,000 boxes, and then that was like literally maybe one big box, and there's like 7,000. That's to make it as realistic and not like a dream or a fantasy that we're giving you here. Like, oh, you're almost done. Like, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And the ego will always want to think that it's nearly or close to be done or to be like all
Oh
of
yeah.
done. And it's always a million times more than you could possibly the ego can accept because it hates that.
Yeah, I mean, after every meditation that I do now, I there's like this little thing that says maybe this time it's different. And that's fun too, right? I was at the park, the same thing. I was staring at everything. I felt like almost completely enlightened. And then I said to myself, I think it's over. The voice of the ego saying it's over. When the
Yeah,
voice is gone, maybe you're closer.
yeah.
And then do you think one more and then we'll wrap it
Well,
up?
I was seeing that there's only two more on the list, I think, right? So maybe we can
Yeah.
just finish them and then we'll have a clean slate for next week.
Okay. Um, okay, so maybe I'll do Vance first. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So morals, ethics, and ego judgment. Okay, let me open this. I've been sitting with the idea of moral nihilism, or that morality itself is a construct. Society often treats right and wrong as relative. Killing is wrong except when done in war or by the state. Stealing is wrong except when done by mega corporations. Drug use is wrong except when prescribed. Even for many, morality doesn't come from inner reflection, but from external sources like religion. At a deeper level, I notice that I don't believe acts are inherently right or wrong, they just are. My ego recoils at saying this, but not because I secretly disagree, but because I don't want to be judged as heartless or psychopathic. Here's my actual question. When I sit alone with these kinds of thoughts, they don't bother me. But when I try to share them, my ego worries about how others will perceive me. How do you navigate sharing deep or radical perspectives without becoming consumed by the fear or misunderstanding or judgment? So, the first thing that I want to say is because I also thought a little bit about this before. Um, so, I haven't ever read about it, but I can kind of understand moral nihilism or that morality itself is a construct. It is a construct. But what came to mind is that the natural state or enlightenment, or which is all the same thing, how animals are, right? It's all the same thing. Um, I don't know if it's, I mentioned animals, but enlightenment, an enlightened human is the most rational human. So that maybe is not said enough. I think Artem says that. So rationality is something that is built in. So if there's no pain in the psyche, there's no reason that you would kill someone unless they were trying to kill you and you had no other choice but to kill them to stop them, right? So that would be absolute rationality. I'm only going to do this if somebody's trying to kill me and there's no other way. So people, especially religious people will say, well, if you don't believe in God, you'll just kill everybody and rape everybody. It's like, wait a minute. That's true only because we have psyches that are full of pain, not because it's human nature, not because you need a law to keep you from doing the stuff. It's because our psyche is full of so much pain that yeah, if you could get away with it, and there's this other thing that I think is very interesting. When you're around a group of people, you're all very similar and everybody looks at each other and says, I think it's okay, right, to do this, to kill someone, to rape someone, to steal. If you're in a group setting like the Nazis, right, and everybody around you is the same and they're all saying, I think it's okay, then in a group setting, I think the ego feels safe to then do things that are horrible. And so morality is a construct but it's a construct. It's sort of hilarious. It's like we live in a world where every single human has an ego, and therefore there is violence, there is hatred, there's all of that. And to keep that in check, you need the construct of morality. You need police, you need laws, because the truth is that the ego wants to destroy the world. The ego wants to everything. And so I think that that's kind of interesting, right? Do you have something?
Yeah. Yeah, just to I mean, yeah, that's all completely true. And the to cycle up to Ben's bit at the bottom about sharing these insights but having immense fear of being judged. The truth is you'll be judged. You'll be immensely judged because you're dealing with other egos which are judge machines. So I would actually say it is an extremely valid question about sharing these ideas, well, this truth, in a safe way, is to do it, discuss these things in the company of people that you know are safe to do so with, because one of the biggest ego defense mechanisms is that of being a good person, and to even entertain the idea that morality is a construct is an abhorrent thing for the majority of people and their egos. Um, so I'm just thinking about it in my own life. Of course, I understand this to be the case as well, and I would discuss these things with Steve. Um, Knowing that uh, it's not going to be heard in the same way, maybe by another person in my life, then that's not something that I would want to entertain because it's not going to be productive. Um, I understand that it's also impossible not to share and discuss all of these things on the path, as you go down them. But I suppose it requires a bit of tactfulness as to who is safe to discuss these things with, because all of this work defies the desires of the ego. So unless it's in a space with other people that are, this forum, this community is the place to discuss these things. Um, but of course, it's very difficult, if the topic of morality comes up and you're speaking about it with a friend or like in that kind of environment, it's difficult to then be at odds with like your own authenticity because like you have this to say.
Yeah.
Um, but that's just the nature of how we are as a society and the dynamics between people. You just have to become kind of thoughtful and skillful of like where and when to share what and with who, um, in a practical sort of advice sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say that because there is a fear of being judged as heartless or being psychopathic. So it's good that you've even, realized this because it means it means that there is a lot of that. There's a lot. I think it's safe to say in everybody's mind. I think Artem says that to have an ego, even if you had like really good parents, to have an ego means that you must have hatred in your psyche. So hatred is just another way to say, you want to kill someone, you want to destroy people. So if that is something that you're afraid to be, judged, other people judge you, then this is something that you can do when you're alone and explore how heartless you can really be. And at first, these things feel very fake and they're not very rewarding because they feel fake. But you playing with what would a psychopath say? Someone that has no feelings and they can hurt people and feel nothing, maybe even smile when they do something horrible. And that could be just in words, right? So if you experience any anger, anything, and then that same practice when the person can't hear you, they can't see you, you're completely alone. And it would be good if it was right after they left and there's nobody around, and then you say something like, I wish I could kill you. Or, whatever, you can use your imagination and say whatever. And if again there's that resistance, you don't want to say it, or you say it and you feel immense shame, that is a great practice. And you can take it further and further. I more recently, what I did is I kind of, instead of doing it a little bit, which is just an outburst, I became the psychopathic character for like 20 minutes. And so again, to make this sound more real, like what does that mean? It's like an actor. So imagine I'm in a movie and I read the script and I'm like, wow, this is a psychopath. He hurts people, he does this, he doesn't feel anything. How can I pretend that I'm this guy? Right? And then you can create things in your imagination, right? We love using our imagination when it comes to like all this crazy stuff in our mind, but why can't we use our imagination to face something, right? So you can create a scenario, a scene where you're hurting someone, right? And you're just nothing is happening. You're in your living room, and you could have a couch, and somebody could be there, and you can practice like hitting them or something in your mind. You can do it with your hand in the air. There's nobody there. And so this is you starting to play and see how far it goes, right? And if you take it as far as possible to the point where you feel comfortable, that's when the ego is going to be scared. And oh, now you're comfortable being a psychopath. So now you've become one. No, that's just that you're just playing with your imagination. And if you became comfortable, then that was real. You kind of learn to love that part, which is one of the hardest, probably the hardest part to love.
Yeah. And I think there's also a very easy mix-up that our minds make when discussing morality. When it's proposed that it is a construct, the ego goes straight away to, oh, so without it, doing all of these bad things is okay, which isn't the case. Um, Without the repressed emotions and the trauma of the sickness of the mind, we are harmless. So
Yeah.
there's no need for morality. There's no need for these ideas. These are constructs to manage the sickness of the repressed mind. This is what these things are. So it's very important because the ego will try and cling to this so much because it's one of like the top things that it wants to do is be a good person, be seen as a good person. Um, so yeah, it's good just as a reminder that it's not that without that there is utter chaos, destruction, and it's all good and fine and like no one cares. It's that should everyone be in the natural state as in just free from repressed emotion, there is no need for it because, as Steve said, that there's ultimate objective rationale, and there would be no need to do any of the things that the mind fantasizes about, and in many cases identifies with, as in like becomes a serial killer, for example. That's a product of the sickness of the mind that comes from the repressed emotions.
Yeah, it's like if someone is just in peace all the time, why would they get up and their heart rate would go really fast to insult someone when they're in absolute peace? That's just a very easy example. It's like, well, there is no possibility that you're absolutely peaceful. And then for the fun of it, you're going to say, "Oh, I'm going to make my whole nervous system kind of go crazy for no reason." The only reason would be for your survival, just like an animal. So that's like you said, I like the word objective and rationality. It's like that's if you're absolutely rational, there is no need for morality because you will never hurt and you'll never harm anyone.
Yeah. There was another very deeply realized teacher who had a great summation of what it was to end up in the natural state, which was, I think it was just happy and harmless
Yeah.
was the description. Um, so I think it's just good to sort of remind when the ego starts to spiral about good and bad, right and wrong, that it's nothing to do with these things. This state of peacefulness and happy and harmless.
Yeah.
Okay, last one.
Oh, is there? Oh, yeah, I went to Ben. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Elena, affirmations. I have another question. Does the affirmations work? Some people say yes, but others say no. I feel energy moving through my body when I say it from my heart, and I'm very present. Sometimes I even feel relief and goosebumps. I don't feel like it does so much work though, and I know this, but the question is, do affirmations have their place in this journey? So, you know, what you described would be the only way that affirmations could be useful. So if affirmations lead to some kind of emotional release, you said goosebumps, that could be a little bit of fear or whatever it is. Um, that's the only way that it would be useful. So some people, for example, there's the Hawaiian one, Ho'oponopono, which is like I love you, I'm sorry, forgive me. There's like four sayings. For some people that are so full of, they have grudges against people, they're full of resentment. They won't even be able to say the word, like for example, Mary, I forgive you. They can't because they're so full of resentment. So if someone like that, who is so closed up, heard about that and they're even remotely open to saying the things, that would be very powerful for that person. But as you go deeper and deeper, affirmations then will kind of lose their effect. So it's like saying I'm rich or I'm happy, or eventually it kind of becomes, so if you use it to kind of pretend that you're not feeling discomfort, then it's useless. So then it's like you're feeling anxiety, I'm peaceful, or whatever the affirmation is, then it's useless. But if it helps you in those ways, then it has a place.
Yeah. I mean, I would go beyond useless as in harmful as well. Because, well, in a sense, because if it depends exactly what you mean by affirmations, but if you're using them as ways to escape what's happening by saying that you are something that you're not, for example, like you feel very bad in the moment you say that. You know, I am grateful, I'm positive, I'm in, abundance is a term that's used a lot. I'm in a state of abundance, or I am this, I am that. My family are healthy and happy. If they're not, if they're taking you out of a place of discomfort, then they are denying the here and now, and they are being used as a band-aid, or to paper over what's happening. And it's another very tempting egoic trick and tool to I mean, the ego just loves special magical devices that it can use to escape the here and now and get something better than it has, and just feel good and live forever. Those are the things that it always wants to do. Um, so I think it can be useful, not in the way that it supposedly is useful. It can be useful when you realize you're doing it to escape discomfort now. Then you can realize that you've latched onto something and you need to have a look. Again, not like I must look. If it's too painful, it's too painful. But if you're able to put your attention on what's happening, this discomfort, then that can lead to something productive. Um, so yeah, all of these things, I think me and Steve will talk about these a lot because these are the specific things that we sort of seek to demystify. Affirmations, manifestation, realms, uh,
Kundalini.
Kundalini, astro traveling. All of these things are powerful distractions ultimately. But once you can see through them as a denial, an absolute rejection, an egoic rejection of the pain of the body right here and right now, then they become these tools that of realization that you're just trying to escape. But it's so painful that of course it is baby steps, and relinquishing the need for these things isn't always an immediate thing. So, but again, I'm sure we'll talk much more about these things.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to add is that, I know what they mean by affirmations, but the only affirmations that I would recommend, they wouldn't call them affirmations, but it is to use your voice to say things out loud when you are alone. And it actually would be pretty much the negative stuff. And it is actually very powerful to use your voice when you're alone to be as real as possible about the pain. and you can play with things. You can even kind of look up at the sky and say God, if that helps you. Sometimes I say Father, even though I'm talking about myself. I feel like, there's this loving Father. You can say whatever you want, almost like if you're in deep pain, you become that pain, that little child that's saying Father. And then you can say stuff like, I'm in so much pain and I don't want to feel pain anymore. Can't it just stop? That's so innocent and so honest that that can make you cry. And so you can play with that. So that would be my type of affirmation, to speak the pain out. And when you dare to speak, to say things that you think are maybe embarrassing, this is too much, this is too emotional, when you go and you say those things out loud, that's when the crying happens. So it's an easy way to access your tears.
Yeah. And also the things that you're supposedly trying to escape from situationally are tainted by the pain that you experience because when pain starts to be alleviated through actually processing it, your external environment and which may well not change at all, your relation to it completely changes. So, an affirmation or a manifestation to be somewhere different or a circumstance to be different, it might seem like that is the thing that you desperately want to escape. But as this process happens and you process your emotions, your relationship to the circumstance changes dramatically, and the resistance to it just, as you cry, your resistance goes down, and it's just simply a different reality, a much better one, by the way. Okay, cool. I think we're done then for this week. Did you have anything else, Steve?
Oh, that's it. So just anyone that's listening, so see you in the next one.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Keep the questions coming. It's been very enjoyable to answer them. And yeah, see you next week.